The night I found my daughter, the forest smelled like wet leaves and iron. Her whisper came before I saw her face. "Abu," she breathed, voice torn thin, "my mill told me I deserved this." Those words landed heavier than the darkness around us, heavier than the blood soaking into the soil beneath her. In that moment, the world narrowed to her eyes, wide, terrified, still trying to protect someone who had already broken her. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, please subscribe to the channel Silent Revenge Story, share this video, and press the bell icon so you never miss a story. I had followed the sound of the river, then the broken trail of her scarf snagged on thorns like a quiet plea. My hands shook as I pushed branches aside, afraid of what I would see, afraid of what I already knew. She lay there as if the woods had rejected her, as if even the earth didn't want to claim the cruelty done to her. Her ankle was twisted at an angle that made my breath stutter. Bruises bloomed like dark flowers across her arms. When I knelt, my knees sank into mud, and I didn't care. I would have sunk forever if it meant she wasn't alone. She tried to smile when she saw me. That smile hurt more than her injuries. "I didn't want to call," she whispered, eyes slipping closed for a second. They said I should learn." The sentence broke apart, each word a shard. I wrapped my jacket around her shoulders, my palms slick with fear, and begged her to stay awake. I told her I was here, that everything would be okay, knowing I was lying to both of us. As I lifted her, memories collided inside me. The day I handed her over in marriage with prayers and trembling pride, the promises spoken with sweet voices and hard eyes. I had trusted their smiles. I had believed the polite words, the tea served just right, the way her mother-in-law praised her cooking while watching for mistakes. Pain has a way of replaying itself backward, rewinding to every moment you ignored the warning signs. On the way to the road, she murmured pieces of the truth like a confession she didn't think she deserved to finish. The argument, the accusations, the push, the laughter. She said, my daughter swallowed, that women like me need lessons. Her hand tightened weakly around my wrist, not asking for revenge, only for safety. That was the cruelty of it. The pain had taught her silence before it taught her anger. At the hospital, the lights were too bright, the questions too many. I answered what I could while staring at the dried blood on my fingers. When they wheeled her away, the hallway stretched long and empty. I sat alone, feeling smaller than I ever had, replaying her whisper again and again. My daughter deserved lullabies and laughter, not lectures delivered with fists and cold smiles. She deserved a life where love wasn't measured by endurance. The doctor spoke in careful tones, fractures, internal bruising, rest. Words that meant time would pass but wounds would remember. I nodded, thanked him, and waited. When I finally saw her again, she was pale but breathing steadily. Relief washed over me, followed by a rage so quiet it scared me. I kissed her forehead and promised I wouldn't leave. She nodded, eyes glistening, and turned her face away as if ashamed of the tears she couldn't stop. Visitors came and went. Relatives whispered advice that sounded like surrender. Be patient. Think of the family. Don't make things worse. Each sentence pressed her deeper into herself. I watched my daughter grow smaller under their well-meaning silence, and I understood then that pain doesn't end with the injury. It multiplies when everyone agrees not to see it. That night, as the machines hummed and the window showed nothing but darkness, I held her hand and listened to her breathing. I made a decision without announcing it, without anger, without noise. Silence had protected them long enough. My daughter slept, unaware that the pain meant to erase her had instead drawn a line I would not step back over. The woods had given her back to me broken but breathing. And breathing meant time. Time meant truth. And truth, I knew, would not stay buried. When morning came, it brought visitors and voices, and with them the second wound. My daughter woke to a room full of people who spoke about her instead of to her. Her mother-in-law arrived first, dressed in soft colors, grief carefully practiced on her face. She didn't look at my daughter's injuries. She looked at the room, measuring sympathy like currency. Such a tragedy, she sighed loudly, as if the walls needed convincing. Young women these days are so emotional. I stood, every muscle tight, but my daughter's fingers brushed my hand, barely there, a warning. She wasn't ready. She wasn't strong enough yet. so I stayed silent and watched as the performance began. Her husband followed, eyes red but dry, the kind of redness that comes from effort, not tears. He told anyone who would listen that she had wandered off after an argument, that she had always been dramatic, that stress made her unstable. He said it gently, kindly, the way lies sound when they want to live. Nurses paused. Relatives nodded. Someone whispered that marriages were fragile, that pressure could make anyone lose balance. Balance. As if a twisted ankle and bruised ribs came from imbalance. My daughter tried to speak once. Her voice cracked and her mother-in-law placed a hand on her arm, too tight, too familiar. "Rest," she said sweetly. "Don't tire yourself with stories." The word stories hung in the air like an accusation. My daughter fell quiet, cheeks burning. I saw it then. The humiliation wasn't accidental. It was organized. By afternoon, the story had traveled faster than truth ever does. Phones buzzed. Relatives called with concern sharpened by curiosity. "We heard she ran away. They say she slipped. Why was she alone?" Each question pushed her deeper into herself. Shame settled over her like a blanket she couldn't push away. She turned her face to the wall and stopped answering. In the corridor, I overheard laughter. Soft, restrained, cruel. Two of her in-laws stood near the vending machine, voices low but clear enough. "This will teach her," one said. "People will talk, she'll learn to behave." The other replied, "And if she doesn't, at least everyone knows she's the problem." They smiled like winners. I realized then that pain was only the opening move. Reputation was the real battlefield. When she was discharged, they insisted on taking her back to their home. "It's only right," the mother-in-law said, eyes daring me to argue. "A wife belongs with her husband." My daughter looked at me, fear and pleading tangled together. I said no, calmly, clearly. The room froze. For the first time, the smiles slipped. "She needs rest," I said. "She'll stay with me." It was a small sentence, but it cracked something. Whispers followed us out. Outside, neighbors stared openly. By evening, the humiliation reached its peak. A family gathering was called without us. Stories were told with dramatic pauses. A message circulated, carefully worded, merciless, suggesting my daughter's behavior had embarrassed them all, that she needed correction, not comfort. I sat beside her at home as she scrolled through her phone, each message a cut. Advice disguised as judgment, sympathy mixed with blame. "Be patient with your husband. Respect elders. Don't ruin your marriage." Not one asked what had been done to her. When she finally dropped the phone, her hands shook. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. That was the moment humiliation completed its work, when the victim begins to doubt her own pain. I wanted to shout, to call every name a lie, to drag truth into the light by force. Instead, I did nothing. I brought her tea. I adjusted her pillows. I let the silence grow heavy and deliberate, because I understood something now. They wanted noise. They wanted reaction. They wanted her to break publicly the way she had broken privately. That night, a knock came at the door. Her brother-in-law stood there, voice smooth, smile thin. "We just want peace," he said. "If she apologizes, this can all end." Apologizes. For surviving. I closed the door gently, firmly, without a word. His footsteps faded, but the message stayed. Inside, my daughter cried herself to sleep, exhausted by a war she never chose. I sat awake, listening to the house breathe, counting every lie that had been spoken in her name. They had humiliated her in public, stripped her of dignity while wearing the mask of concern, and they believed the story was finished. They were wrong. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like the pause before a storm that everyone pretends not to see. My daughter stopped asking questions. She stopped defending herself. She learned quickly that every explanation was twisted, every tear counted as weakness. Silence became her shield, not because it protected her, but because it hurt less than being misunderstood again and again. People came to the house with rehearsed concern. They spoke in careful tones, glancing at her injuries and then away, as if looking too closely might make them responsible. "Time heals," they said. "Pray. Don't think too much." Each sentence asked her to shrink a little more. She nodded politely, the way girls are taught to do when their truth is inconvenient. When they left, she would stare at the door as if trying to remember the sound of her own voice. Her phone stayed silent now, not because people cared, but because the story had settled. A woman who caused trouble, a wife who disrespected elders, a daughter who couldn't keep peace. Silence is powerful that way. It convinces everyone that the loudest lie must be true. I watched her absorb that silence until it shaped the way she walked, the way she breathed. Even pain became something she apologized for. At night, when she thought I was asleep, she would wince quietly, biting back sounds as she shifted in bed. I wanted to tell her to cry, to scream, to let the walls hear what the world refused to. But I didn't. I understood now that this silence wasn't emptiness. It was weight. And weight, if held long enough, can build strength no one expects. Her husband called once. His voice was gentle, practiced. "I hope she's feeling better," he said. "Tell her we forgive her, forgive." The words slid between us like a blade. I answered with the same calm I had learned to wear. "She's resting." Nothing more. After that, the calls stopped. Silence answered silence. Weeks passed. Bruises faded from skin but not from memory. She began to walk again, slowly, carefully, as if the ground itself could betray her. One afternoon she sat beside me in the courtyard and watched the birds fight over crumbs. "They make noise for everything," she said softly, "even for nothing." I waited. She added, barely audible, "I wish I could be that loud." It was the first thing she'd said that felt like a beginning. I didn't rush her. Silence had been forced on her. Reclaiming her voice had to be her choice. Instead, I started listening more closely, to neighbors, to relatives, to the gaps in their stories. Silence teaches you that too, who avoids your eyes, who changes the subject, who repeats the same line too perfectly. Piece by piece, I learned how carefully this lie had been built, how many people had benefited from her being quiet. One evening, a distant cousin visited, someone not close enough to fear consequences. Over tea, she hesitated, then spoke. "They say she was punished," she whispered. "That elders sometimes must be harsh. Punished." The word confirmed everything. When she left, I sat alone and let the silence settle again, not heavy now but focused, purposeful. My daughter noticed the change before anyone else. "You're different," she said one night, watching me from the doorway. I smiled and said nothing. She didn't need explanations yet. Silence had taken so much from her, I wouldn't use it against her too. Instead, I waited. I waited while they grew comfortable, while they told the story so many times they forgot it was a lie, while they believed her quiet meant surrender. That is the danger of silence. You mistake it for defeat. They did. And in doing so, they stepped closer to the edge without ever looking down. The day she finally spoke again, it wasn't dramatic. No tears, no shaking. She simply said, "I remember everything." Her voice was steady, almost calm. She met my eyes, and for the first time since the woods, there was no apology in them. Silence had done its work. It had preserved her truth, kept it untouched while the world shouted itself hoarse. I nodded, understanding what she was really saying. She was ready. And once silence ends, it doesn't fade, it breaks. When silence finally broke, it didn't do so with shouting or accusations. It shifted power in ways so subtle that no one noticed until it was too late. My daughter began with small things. She stood straighter. She stopped lowering her eyes when names from that house were mentioned. When relatives spoke about her instead of to her, she waited. Let them finish. Let them hear themselves. Power, I learned, often changes hands the moment one side stops begging to be understood. She asked for her documents back first, her certificates, her marriage papers, her jewelry. The request was polite, formal, sent through a message that carried no emotion. Her mother-in-law replied with surprise masked as offense. "Why are you being so cold?" she asked. Cold, as if warmth had ever saved my daughter. The items arrived 2 days later, tossed into a bag, carelessly returned. That carelessness told me everything. They still believed she was weak. Then my daughter went to the doctor again, this time alone. She asked for reports, detailed ones, dates, descriptions. She didn't speak of revenge. She spoke of accuracy. At home. She placed the papers neatly in a folder, hands steady. Watching her, I felt something I hadn't felt since the woods, not rage but respect. She was taking ownership of her story, one fact at a time. The family noticed the distance. Invitations came, then demands. "Come talk like adults," her husband messaged. "Stop embarrassing us." Embarrassment, another word they used when control slipped. She didn't reply. Power doesn't argue, it chooses when to be seen. Instead, she reached out to people they hadn't considered dangerous, women who had once married into that family and quietly disappeared from gatherings. Conversations were short at first, then longer. Stories aligned in ways too precise to ignore. Patterns emerged. My daughter listened more than she spoke. Each story returned something to her that had been stolen: certainty. At home, she practiced walking without pain, then without fear. She began wearing the colors she liked, not the ones that kept peace. Neighbors noticed. Whispers changed tone. "She looks different. She's confident." Confidence unsettles those who rely on submission. Her mother-in-law came unannounced one afternoon, eyes sharp with concern that didn't reach her mouth. "People are talking," she warned. "You should think about your future." My daughter offered her tea and listened. Then calmly she said, "I am." That was all, no defense, no apology. The older woman left uneasy, her authority unacknowledged for the first time. I watched from the doorway, heart pounding, as I realized the shift had already happened. They were reacting now. Not controlling, reacting. Power had moved and they hadn't even seen it cross the room. That evening my daughter sat with me and said, "I don't want them to hurt anyone else." It wasn't revenge in her eyes, it was responsibility. She had learned what silence could hide. Now she wanted light. Together we planned carefully, not emotionally. Who to tell, what to show, when to speak. Truth doesn't need volume, but it does need timing. The message that finally went out was simple: a request for mediation, neutral ground, written records attached, no accusations, only facts, injuries, dates, witnesses. The reply came fast, angry, then cautious. Threats softened into questions, questions into delays. They were afraid now, and fear makes powerful people clumsy. At night I lay awake, listening to the house, thinking of how easily power had once crushed my daughter and how quietly it was changing shape. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't begging. She was standing, and that was enough. The woods had taken her strength once. Silence had returned it. And now, with every measured step, she was moving the world just enough that it could no longer pretend nothing had happened. The shock didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like a door opening in a room everyone thought was locked. The mediation date was set, neutral and ordinary, which is exactly why they underestimated it. They came confident, rehearsed, ready to perform concern and dominance in equal measure. My daughter walked in with a folder so plain it looked harmless. She wore no jewelry from that house, no symbols they could claim. Her face was calm. That calm unsettled them more than anger ever could. They spoke first. Long explanations, gentle blame, stories polished by repetition. Her mother-in-law sighed at the right moments. Her husband nodded, eyes down, wounded pride carefully displayed. The mediator listened, took notes, asked questions that went nowhere. It was all very familiar until my daughter asked softly for permission to speak. She didn't accuse, she didn't cry. She placed the folder on the table and opened it with the care of someone handling glass. Medical reports came first, dates matched, injuries documented. The mediator leaned forward, then photographs, clinical, unembellished, undeniable. A silence fell that no one rushed to fill. When she finished, she added something unexpected: messages, screenshots, voice notes. Her husband's voice, calm and instructive. Her mother-in-law's words, sharp and instructive. "You deserved it." The room changed temperature. They tried to interrupt. The mediator raised a hand. "Please," he said, "let her finish." Power shifted again, visibly now. My daughter continued, still calm. She explained the night in the woods in short sentences, without drama. She named who pushed. She named who watched. She named who told her to learn a lesson. Each name landed like a stone dropped into water, no splash, just ripples spreading outward. Her mother-in-law laughed once, too loud, then stopped when no one joined her. "This is exaggeration," she said. "Family matters shouldn't be public." Public. The mediator looked at her. "They aren't," he replied. "Not yet." That word "yet" did something to them. Their confidence faltered. The shock came when my daughter revealed the final piece. She had spoken to a lawyer, quietly. She had filed a report not to destroy but to document. "I want protection," she said, "and I want this pattern recorded." Pattern. That was the word that broke the room open. Patterns don't belong to one argument or one night. They belong to history, to repetition, to intent. Her husband stood up, voice raised now, control slipping. "You're trying to ruin us," he said. My daughter met his eyes. "No," she replied. "I'm trying to stop you." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The mediator ended the session early. He advised distance, legal counsel, consequences. Outside, their family gathered in confusion, anger spilling into the corridor. Phones came out. Accusations flew. But something had changed. People were watching, listening. The story they had controlled for months no longer obeyed them. Shock works that way. It freezes you long enough for truth to move. That evening, messages flooded in. Some angry, some pleading, some suddenly respectful. My daughter read none of them. She handed me her phone and went to the window, watching the city lights. "It's done," she said, not with triumph but relief. Revenge hadn't been loud, it hadn't been cruel, it had been exact. And exactness terrifies those who survive on intimidation. The days that followed were full of consequences disguised as negotiations. Offers to settle, requests to talk privately, promises of change. My daughter declined them all. She had learned the cost of private rooms. She chose daylight now. Neighbors began asking different questions. Women began telling quiet stories. A cousin called, voice shaking, to say she wished she'd spoken sooner. Shock has a second wave, the one that reaches people who were never meant to be involved but always were. At night, I watched my daughter sleep without flinching for the first time since the woods. I thought of how close they had come to erasing her with fear and shame. Instead, their own certainty had undone them. They had believed power was permanent. They had believed silence meant consent. They had believed no one would ever open that door. They were wrong, and once shock passes, what remains is judgment. Justice didn't arrive with apologies or bowed heads. It arrived quietly, the way morning light does, revealing what was already there. The report moved forward, slowly, properly, not as a spectacle but as a record. Statements were taken, timelines aligned. The pattern my daughter had named began to speak for itself. When truth is consistent, it doesn't need decoration. Her husband's family tried one last time to control the ending. They sent elders. They sent messages wrapped in scripture and tradition. They offered reconciliation, then threatened consequences. My daughter listened once politely and then asked a single question. "What changes if I forgive you?" No one answered. Forgiveness, they realized, was something they wanted without offering safety. Justice asks for more than words. The distance became permanent. Court dates were set, then delayed, then set again. Each delay revealed another crack, another inconsistency, another witness who remembered too clearly to lie. The mediator's notes mattered. The medical reports mattered. The recordings mattered. And my daughter mattered most of all, standing there without fear, telling the same story the same way every time. There were consequences, not dramatic ones, not the kind stories like to exaggerate, but real ones. Conditions imposed, mandatory counseling, restrictions that limited access and power, a record that would follow them, quiet but unerasable. The family that once spoke with certainty now spoke carefully. The mother-in-law's voice lost its edge in public spaces. Authority doesn't vanish, it diminishes. That was enough. For my daughter, justice took a different shape. She returned to school. She laughed again, softly at first, then without checking who might hear. She made friends who asked questions and waited for answers. She learned that dignity isn't something you defend loudly, it's something you live consistently. On the anniversary of the night in the woods, she asked to go for a walk. We went together. The forest smelled the same, but it no longer owned the memory. She stood where she had fallen and breathed. "I'm still here," she said, and the world agreed. People talk about closure as if it's a door you close and lock. It is. It's a window you open so air can move again. Some nights, she still wakes from dreams she doesn't describe. Some days, anger visits without warning. Justice doesn't erase pain. It gives it a place to rest. The community changed too, slowly. Women spoke in pairs at first, then in groups. Boundaries were named. Elders listened more than they spoke. The story that once humiliated my daughter now warned others, not with fear but with clarity. Moral justice has a way of teaching without shouting. One evening, as we sat together, my daughter asked me why I stayed quiet for so long. I told her the truth. Because silence can be a weapon, I said, but it can also be a shield. I was waiting for you to choose how to use it. She nodded. I'm glad we waited, she said. If we had rushed, they would have called it anger. Now they call it facts. That was the ending they never planned for. Not revenge that consumed, but justice that corrected. Not humiliation returned, but dignity restored. The woods did not define her. Neither did their cruelty. What defined her was what she did next, how she stood, how she spoke, how she refused to disappear. On the night the final order came through, we didn't celebrate. We cooked dinner. We talked about ordinary things. Life, unafraid, returned to its rightful size. Before bed, she hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for finding me." I held her a moment longer than usual and understood something simple and final. Moral justice is not about punishment, it's about protection. It's about making sure that when someone whispers, "I didn't deserve this," the world finally answers, "You're right."